All eyes on the Fed for the Fed meeting. Whilst the Dow soars, the Nasdaq falls. Earnings all around. Everything's moving in terms of the markets all around for sure. And on top of that as well, surprise Iranian missile attack, and the US is thwarting the attack as well too. So lots happening. Let's make sense of it all. This is the midweek update. I'll see you around the corner in a few moments. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strategic Markets, your place for fundamental and technical analysis all at once. And we are into the midweek update, in the last midweek update for July of 2026. Look at this. We have a Fed meeting about to actually unravel 29th of July over in the US. We've just finished up trading here in Australia on the 29th of July, and we're about to get into this Fed meeting, which is going to happen in 11 hours' time. I'm recording this at 4:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, and we can see that the odds of a hike in terms of the rates over in the US are now rising to 29%. So 29% chance of a rate hike, 70% chance of no rate hike overall. Now, around about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that rate hike percentage was around about 10%. It was actually fairly low. So we've actually had around about three times an increase in terms of the rate hike projection. Will it happen? Will it not? It could. Well, let's wait and see what does happen. Now, it might happen, might not. We'll wait and see. It could. We'll wait overall. Now, obviously, we know that the bond market itself is weak. We can see that in the chart directly in terms of what's going on overall. Last couple of days, though, the bonds have actually gone up. Now, remember on Sunday, we were talking about it being at this point here, bonds have been at the weakest point for a very long time overall. And that corresponds overall with increasing rates themselves in terms of on the 10-year, being the TNX. And I'll bring the TNX up for you right now. Now, the TNX has actually drawn back as well over the last couple of days. And that corresponds with, obviously, the bonds rising over the last couple of days. And I'll bring it back to the bonds there for a moment. This is probably the key chart overall, as it's actually now currently testing this quarterly VWAP right now, being this pink line. So let's wait and see what happens. But this will be your key chart overall, and probably has been the only chart really, apart from a couple of others which I'll go through shortly, that have changed over the past couple of days. But more on that shortly. Overall, though, what else has happened over the last few days? Well, in terms of overnight, the Dow actually rose quite substantially, and that's probably one of the other charts that have really changed over the last couple of days as well. Really, other than that, not really much has changed since we spoke on Sunday. Now, Yash is away at the moment, and to tell you the truth, I'm glad he's actually on holiday at the moment, because really not much has actually gone on in terms of the markets in the grand scheme of things when we really take a look at things, and you'll see that shortly. But, okay, the Dow has increased. Great, but what does that mean for the breadth of the market overall? As we'll see shortly, not really much. But really, in terms of the Dow going up a lot, sure, it really did. But you can see the Dow went up, but the Nasdaq itself actually fell. But when we look at the charts, the Nasdaq itself had actually risen recently, and now it's fallen back to where it basically was. So there really hasn't been all that much change. But what's really going on under the hood? We have got this going on. Lots and lots of earnings. We've got companies going up, we've got companies going down, we've got things moving around all over the place. There are lots and lots of things happening at this point in time in terms of companies releasing their earnings, which happen on a quarterly basis. We get a lot of movement going on. Now, in terms of earnings this week, we still have a lot of big earnings going on, especially in terms of at the end of the close of today, being Wednesday. Take a look at what happens after the close today. We have Microsoft, we have Meta, we have ARM, we have Qualcomm. That's just 4 big companies overall that are actually releasing. We've also got a few other big ones as well too. Robinhood, O'Reilly, Lam Research, Chipotle. There's some big ones there. Tomorrow morning, Bristol Myers Squibb, big pharmaceutical company, MasterCard, Altria, Stellantis, some big ones there, even Ferrari. But then Thursday, have a look at that as well too. Apple, Amazon, Roblox, Reddit, massive companies overall. Rivian even. Okay, so there's some other ones there. Friday before the opening, ExxonMobil, Moderna, another pharmaceutical company, Chevron, AbbVie, another pharmaceutical company. So overall, even Colgate-Palmolive, huge number of companies, and big companies, mind you, releasing earnings this week. No wonder things are moving around a little bit in terms of the actual companies themselves. But when we take a look at the charts themselves too, you'll see that the movement itself is actually being more confined to the big caps, notably these guys. So overall, you can see why the movement is being in terms of the big companies themselves, in terms of the movements. And they've actually been quite good in terms of some of these particular earnings and the reason why it's actually raising some of these. Okay, so Coca-Cola had some bumper earnings overall. Boeing, bumper earnings. So overall, there've been some big movements there, which has risen the Dow in particular. On top of that as well, we've actually now had an Iranian missile attack that's actually occurred pretty much overnight as well. And the US has thwarted that surprise Iranian missile attack as well, and they've joined forces with the Saudis. So in terms of all of this that's going on, we've got a lot of push and pull kind of things there. And apparently because of this as well, apparently what's been going on top of that is that oil has spiked. We'll have a look at that chart in a moment, and you can see whether or not oil has really spiked or not. So we'll take a look and see what you think overall with all of these headlines. So firstly, keep an eye on this in relation to what's going on in 11 hours time or thereabouts by the time I finish this video and by the time I publish it. But essentially, what's basically going to be happening is we're going to have Kevin Walsh speaking, we're going to have all of these aspects going on in terms of the Fed, and we'll have an interest rate decision, we'll have the Fed speak, all of those kind of things there. So expect some movement, expect some aspects going on in terms of the markets themselves. There'll be a fair amount of intraday movements going on in the markets themselves too. So the day traders will be having lots and lots of fun. A lot of things will be going on. But take a look to see how the markets, in particular in terms of the TLT, react to this quarterly VWAP overall, as well as the short-term moving averages, being the 8-day moving average, the yellow line there, as well as the 15-day EMA as well, being that cyan line. They're going to be important factors in terms of the TLT. That's the bonds. And also, of course, the rates in terms of whether or not the rates will increase or rates will decrease. So that'll be the important thing there. So let's have a look at the Dow. So when it comes to the Dow, what's been going on there? Well, the Dow itself has actually been increasing substantially over the last couple of days compared to where we were at the end of the week. You can see it actually has risen up above the short-term moving averages and the quarterly VWAP there. Once again, those same lines we were just looking at there in terms of the bonds. So it's risen in terms of that. How substantial was this rise? If we take a look at the left-hand side chart, which is the Ichimoku curve, it's looking pretty good because it looks as though we're going to start forming higher highs and higher lows on the lagging indicator for one, and potentially this could actually drag the Tenkan Sen above the baseline as well to show even further strength. The big question though is, how broad is this in the market? You have to remember the Dow Jones itself are the top 30 stocks in the market. They're the big caps, yes they are, but how broad an extent is this in the overall market, and can it drag the rest of the market up with it to bring all of this up? And the reason why I say that is, okay, let's take a look at the small caps, for instance, having a look at the Russell. Now the Russell, we'll have a look at the IWM to get the quarterly VWAP on that as well too. It's still being constrained by that quarterly VWAP, as you can see. It hasn't been able to bounce its head up above that quarterly VWAP, being that pink line. It still can't get above the short-term moving averages at this point either. And it's still actually having a decent go with that 50-day moving average being the blue line. So that's something. But you can see the lagging indicator struggling to get above the unit prices. That's one point. The baseline is above the Tenkan Sen. Some weakness going on there as well. Okay, it's above the cloud, so there's some strength there, but the unit price has got to get above all of this to be able to show some strength. So there's some deficiencies there in the Russell in terms of the small caps. Something to keep an eye on there. But really, not much has changed since the weekend. Weekend is, we're right there. Slightly up above the 50-day moving average, sure, but not really all that much strength going on overall there. So keep an eye on all of that. The bigger concerns, though, are the Qs in terms of technology. That has sunk exactly as well how we were talking about that on the weekend in terms of coming down to the 100-day moving average being the white line. We're really struggling here in terms of tech. On top of that as well, you can really see that the lagging indicator has now penetrated the top part of the cloud, another negative sign. On top of that, you can really see the Tenkan Sen has really started to decline, as has the baseline, and the Tenkan Sen is below the baseline. So we've got really negative sentiment going on here in terms of tech. It's really starting to crumble big time. So see whether or not we actually get a bounce off the 100-day moving average and whether we can bounce back off the base of this cloud as well too. That's a big thing overall. The SPY trailing beneath all of the moving averages as well as, I shouldn't say all the moving averages, at least all the short-term moving averages, as well as your quarterly VWAP. So there's some weakness really coming through here on this. The lagging indicator, indecisive at this stage, but it has actually come beneath the Tenkan Sen, even though it's come back above it, but it's still beneath the baseline, as you can see. So we're really trying to figure out exactly where to go here on this particular thing. Wait and see. Just indecisive at this point. But, really get some caution going on with this. We can really see technology is still the weakest at this point in time until proven otherwise. That's the biggest thing. Now let's have a look at Brent Crude. Brent Crude overall, has that really spiked? I've put in that pause there for the dramatic pose. Okay, you've got to decide that for yourself. Has this really spiked as much as the media is really saying? You've really got to take that with a grain of salt and have a look at the chart yourself. Okay, sure, we're bouncing off volume profile areas from back in 2023. Okay, yeah, no problem there at all. But we're really not bouncing off much else. We're bouncing off the 150-day moving average being the orange line. We're bouncing off a declining 50-day moving average being that blue line. We haven't got above the short-term moving averages at this point, and we're still trading beneath the yearly VWAP being that green line. And we're also trading beneath the 100-day moving average being the white line. So overall, not convinced at this point in time that everything is really hunky-dory and we've got a spike. So let's just say at this point in time, we're still in a range. We're in a range between the quarterly VWAP being this pink line and the yearly VWAP being that green line. That is the range that we're currently in at the present time with Brent Crude. If we switch to USO, we're beneath the quarterly VWAP at this point, and we're above the yearly VWAP. Once again, we're in a range. But if you take a look at the overnight area, we're up at 124.80. So we could actually be back above the quarterly VWAP when trading recommences. Let's see how things do go. We'd still be beneath the short-term moving averages at this point in time and could be dragged down by Brent Crude, but it'll be interesting. We'd still be trading beneath at this stage, or actually probably around that level of the 50-day moving average, but still beneath the rising 100-day moving average. There's a lot of congestion going on at this point in time. So watch this space, but there's a lot of swinging going on and a lot of movement. Whether you'd be game to actually trade this at this point in time, okay, leave it up to you. Uranium, still falling apart at this point in time. So, whether this is an indication as to whether or not the war is still continuing or what the circumstances going on, you can definitely be a guess in relation to all of that. The dollar still being stubborn, no change as to what's going on there. So really, overall, there's a lot of other factors here. There really hasn't been much change from the weekend. Same with gold, same situation. In fact, if anything, it's probably weakened since the weekend. Same with silver. Okay, you can see that right there for yourself. Copper weakening compared to the weekend. Iron weakening compared to the weekend. Bitcoin, well, yeah, pretty much weakening compared to the weekend. We're testing this April 2021 support line again. Ethereum, similar situation, weakening again, coming back towards the short-term moving averages. So really not much change compared to the weekend for a lot of other instruments. So I'm not really going to waste your time much in relation to everything that's going on in the markets at this point in time. The biggest thing to really keep an eye on, and we were even saying it on the weekend as well too, this was the chart of the week, really, even on the weekend, and it remains so. Everyone's waiting to see whether or not there is going to be a change in the rates. This is your bugbear, and this will be the thing that will determine direction of the market more than anything else, even more so compared to what the action in Brent crude is or what the action in USO is at this stage. So really keep an eye out for this, and this will more than likely have more of an influence in the market than anything else at this point in time until things get sorted out when the meeting happens in relation to the decision in terms of interest rate decisions, and also in terms of the decision and also the words that Kevin Walsh will actually mention in today's meeting when it comes along. So I'll get off the soapbox right now, and I'll get onto publishing this as soon as I possibly can, so you have this information as soon as you possibly can actually have it and be able to make any potential decisions in terms of your investing and so on. Obviously not financial advice, of course, but more than anything, this is the key at this point in time in relation to everything that's going on in the markets and where things go from here. It's going to be a very interesting day in terms of day trading and all of those aspects. This is the key chart right now more than anything else overall. So I wish you all the best in terms of everything that's going on for the rest of the week. Keep an eye on this, keep an eye on earnings, but overall this, as well as the Dow at this point in time, especially with all of the major earnings that are going on, and then keep an eye exactly as well in terms of what's going on with tech, because obviously that'll also be influenced especially by all of the earnings as well. Okay, I'll catch up with you on the weekend. Special thanks also as well in terms of with Mark as well for his ongoing support. And if there's anything you'd like us to cover in relation to all of this, obviously Yash is still on holidays, but anything else you'd like to cover, let us know. And thank you so much for all the comments as well I've been receiving, firstly from Mark, as well as also from those who've contacted me privately through the ASX Traders United site as well too, letting me know that sector breakdown as well was really helpful. I will keep on doing that on a frequent basis as well on the weekends. At least that way what we'll have with that is we'll have the full complete week every time we actually do those analyses as well, which I think will be really, really helpful. So I'll leave it there for now, and I'll catch up with you on the weekend. Bye for now.